Good evening, all. A warm good evening to one and all present here. All the executive members of various regions, subsections, and principals of various colleges, organizing committee of this today's webinar, branch counselors and student volunteers, myself, Dr. Parmeshwari BD, Chair IEEE Bangalore, ITS Bangalore Chapter, and Professor at Department of TCE, GSSS IEEE Mysore. Welcome you all to the international webinar on detection of cyber grooming through use of behavioral biometrics, organized by the IEEE Information Theory Society Bangalore Chapter in association with IEEE Bangalore Section and IEEE Mysore Subsection. So the topic is chosen is highly relevant in the current scenario. I request all the participants to stay muted for smooth conduction of the event. IEEE Information Theory Society memberships enables individuals to stay current update within a chosen technology and ensure one is in touch with the peers. IEEE Information Theory Society is a leading technical society that focuses on processing, transmission, storage, and use of information, as well as the foundation of communication process. And also, I would like to bring to notice that the Information Theory Society membership for student members is going to reduced $0.5, and for professional members is reduced to 12.5 membership due. And I take this opportunity to welcome our today's speaker, Dr. Patrick Bours, Professor, Department of Information Security and Communication Technology, Norwegian University of Science and Technology, Norway, for accepting our invitation to be the speakers of today's event. Thank you. Welcome you, Professor. I take this opportunity to welcome all the participants of today's event and all the executive members of IEEE Bangalore Section and IEEE Mysore Subsection, IEEE Society Bangalore Chapter. Welcome all of you once again. I request Dr. Amber to introduce the today's speaker. Amber, over to you.
Am I audible?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Param, to get me chance to introduce Dr. Patrick. Very good afternoon, Dr. Patrick, and good evening to all the participants. I would like to introduce Dr. Patrick. He studied his discrete mathematics at Eindhoven University of Technology in the Netherlands, his MSc in 1990 and PhD in 1994. He worked 10 years at the Netherlands National Communication Security Agency, NLN-CSA, as a senior policy member in the area of crypto with a focus on public key crypto and the random number generation. He started his postdoc in July 2005 at Norwegian Information Security Laboratory, NIS Lab, at Gjøvik University College in a project authentication in a health service environment. As of July 2008, he was appointed as associate professor at NIS Lab and is specialized in authentication and more specifically biometrics. His main research interest is in behavior biometrics, with many papers on gait recognition, keystroke dynamics, and continuous authentication. So from 2012, he served as a full professor position at NIS Lab. He was also head of the NIS Lab in the period of 2009 till 2012. Currently, he is working on the chat room security project, where the goal is to detect people with the fake profiles and child predators based on their typing and stylometric behavior. So this is a brief introduction to Dr. Patrick Bours. So with this introduction, I would like to welcome Dr. Patrick here in our Information Theory Society webinar. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for having me as a speaker at your webinar, and I will also want to thank you for the kind introduction. As said, I will say something today about the research that we're doing here And the title of the presentation is Detection of Cyber Grooming Through the Use of Behavioral Biometrics. You already heard that I have a lot of research done in behavioral biometrics. I can be very short here on the who am I slide, because most of it was mentioned already. As said, my research interest is in behavioral biometrics. Gate was mentioned, keystroke dynamics, continuous authentication was mentioned, but I am also interested in actually applying the theoretical research to real life problems. A project that we're working on these days is what is called contract cheat detection in exams, where I want to detect if an exam that is delivered, if that is written by the actual student, or if he hired somebody to write that exam for him or her. And also the project that I'm working on is related to this presentation, and that's the detection of sexual predators or cyber grooming conversations in online chat rooms. Normally I'm having a presentation in front of a big audience and I can have interaction with the audience. That's a bit difficult in a webinar, but I will play the audience myself now. So what I'm going to show you here is the conversations that we have analyzed, and I will give some comments and tell you what we can actually derive from this conversation. This is a conversation between two people who just met, and they have never met in real life. They met in this online chat. And so a conversation is always starting easy. You just start with greeting each other and there is not much going on. You will see two people, one blue person and one red person, and you see what they write, and we'll try to figure out something about these two persons. So the conversation went further, and now we learn already a bit. So what the red person is saying here, this is Chris from Meet Me, right? So that person is getting confirmation that this blue person is somebody she met online on meetme.com, which is an online webpage, and that person is named Chris. So we now know that this person is named Chris, so this is a male. From the red person, we don't know yet. And then the conversation goes on. They don't know each other, they just started talking, and so they learn a bit about each other, apparently where they live and what they do. And we learn a bit again from this. Here, the blue person says, I used to work in Highland Park. So that person has had a job. And so that tells me that this person, which was a male, we know that already, that this person who worked at a pizza place is an adult. So we have Mr. Blue here. The red person, we still don't know if this is male or female, or anything else. But we know that this is an adult male. Blue is an adult male. Conversation goes on. Yeah, a bit about pizza. Pizza is my favorite, the red person says, and I guess that holds for many people. And then we see something actually now happening that happens a lot in online conversations. You will never have that in a face-to-face conversation as easy as you see it in an online conversation. But what happens next is that the two are talking about pizza, and then there comes a question in between. Are you single? Yeah, are you? Yeah. And the rest around it is still about pizza. So in online conversations, we often say that conversations are asynchronous, that messages do not necessarily are following on the previous message. So not sick of working there or of eating pizza is not a response to are you single, but it's still a response to the pizza conversation that was going on. Then there is a question from Mr. Blue. Do you have more pictures? I'm not sure whether the word more comes from where he has seen already pictures from the red person, but that's not so relevant. But the red person says, I will find someone. And while this person is searching for pictures, Mr. Blue continues. And actually here, this person is asking, what's your free? Actually, he meant what's your number. And so he's asking for a cell phone number. So what we see now is also something very specific. They were on this public chat, meetme.com. They went over to this private chat. I can tell you this is Yahoo chat, so this is from a number of years ago already. So they went to a private chat where there were just the two of them. And now within 30, 40 messages, Mr. Blue is already asking for a new way of communicating, a cell phone. And then once he has done that, he says, "You're cute." That's a reaction probably of getting a picture from the red person. We have no idea exactly what this person is, but the reaction from a male adult saying "you're cute," at least that would make me think that the red person is a female. It's not entirely certain, of course. A male could also say of another male, "you're cute," but in many cases that would indicate that this is a female. So we now know an adult male is talking to a female, but we don't know yet if this female is an adult or a child. But then the conversation goes on, and the red person says, "I do, but my dad put this approval calling list on." So the red person has a mobile phone, but she is not allowed to do freely what she wants because her dad has control over it. This clearly states that this is a child. And so now we have an adult male talking to a female child. Many cases where that could be absolutely normal, but in some cases we want to detect this because there is more going on, and there is actually a cyber grooming conversation going on. I can show the rest of the conversation also. Something very typical again. "Do you have any more pics?" That's what the girl asked of the man, and then he says, "But not on this computer." So he is not giving that. Actually, what I left out in this conversation is that on meetme.com, they got in contact, and actually the the blue person is a 24-year-old male. The red person is a 14-year-old female. And so they knew when they started this conversation that one was an adult and the other was a child. That makes a question like, "Are you single?" from a male to a child a bit odd question. Do you have do you have pictures? That's an odd question. Wanting to get in the cell phone number of a child. All of these are very strange things. This is actually this is part of a very long conversation, over 2,500 messages, that was classified as a cyber grooming conversation, and the blue person is actually convicted by a court of law in the United States for cyber grooming. Okay, so that is part of what was in the title. In the title, I mentioned cyber grooming. This is the kind of conversation that we want to detect in this research. In the title of the conversation also said biometrics, and most of you will know biometrics. If you have a mobile phone, many of you will either have fingerprint or face recognition turned on. There have actually been also mobile phones that use iris recognition, the colored part of the eye, for recognizing people, but not so popular on mobile phones, but many have heard of that. So when I go into the street and I talk about biometrics, people think about fingerprint recognition, face recognition immediately. This is what we call biological biometrics. These things have to do with the structure of your body. There is also a form of biometrics that has to do with the function of the body, with how we perform particular tasks, and that is called behavioral biometrics. And these are three examples of it. One is recognizing some person by the way that he talks, speaker recognition. We have also signature recognition. So if a signature is written, can we recognize that that is from the correct person? And then, as mentioned in the introduction already, research that we have done here also is on recognizing people by the way that they walk. You can do that in a number of different ways. Mostly you see that people have used video recording to recognize people by the way that they walk. We did it slightly different. We used accelerometers and we measured how somebody walked. All very interesting research, but the research that is most interesting for today is these two. The one on the bottom is called Keystroke Dynamics, where we know that we can recognize a person when they are typing on a keyboard, and we can recognize their typing rhythm. And that is, we don't look at globally at is somebody typing quickly or is somebody typing slowly, but we look at detailed, small details of how somebody is typing. We will also look at word usage. What kind of words are somebody using? People often don't see that as a biometric feature, but again, the words that we use when we write are often also very personal, and so people can be recognized out of this. I will say a bit more about keystroke dynamics because most people don't know that. As I said, we want to recognize a person based on the way that they type on a keyboard. And what we can measure is not that much. We can measure actually when a key is pressed down. So here we press down the P and then we measure when that key is released again. Yeah, and we can do that for all of the keys that I use in the typing. We can measure the time it's pressed down and the time that is released. And then from that, we can calculate actually two features, duration and latency. Duration is the time that I kept a particular key down. So here in this picture, you can see that I pressed the key, the P key down at some point, and a bit later in time, I released it. That time interval, the length of that time interval, is called the duration of the letter P in this case. Yeah, here in this example, you see that the duration of the letter S is much smaller than the duration of the P. So apparently this person is a bit slower on typing the P than he is on typing the S. And he typed the S again, and this might not be exactly the same period as here, the same duration. Yeah, but you see that it is very close. Yeah, we always type the same key with approximately the same duration. There is some variation on it, but it is not an extreme difference. Then we also have something called latency. Latency is actually the time that I have to move from one key to the next key. So I type the key S and I release that key, and then I move and press the next key. In this case, it's the same key, but that doesn't matter. So the time between releasing the first key and pressing the next key, that time is called the latency. Yeah, so here, if we look at the arrows here, we have the duration of the S, that's this small interval. Then we have the latency between the S and the S, that's possible because I typed the same key twice. Latency between those, that's this length, and then the duration of the second time that I typed the S. Yeah, and then I'll get again the latency between releasing the S and pressing down the W, so I can calculate that again, etc., etc. Out of these detailed information of durations of the keys and latencies between the two keys, I can use that kind of information to recognize a user and to identify a user. So that's how keystroke dynamics works. That's a technique in behavioral biometrics that is researched a lot already. Then I want to say something about what we write. So before I said the way how we write and what we write, those are interesting topics for today's presentation. But before I say something about how we write, I want to take you on a very brief history lesson on communication. I start approximately 50,000 years ago in the time when we had cavemen roaming around the earth. And those people, they had some kind of rudimentary language that they were speaking to each other. If there was a person telling a story, and then that person that heard that story telling that story again to some other words, you can imagine that there are small changes into a story because you hear a story and then you try to tell that story to somebody else. You know that the story will slightly change over time. Also, this is a story told in a local community, and so if you look at the Earth, that story will be locally told. And if this tribe would come in contact with another tribe, okay, they might tell the story also, and it might travel to other areas around the world. But that is a very slow process. So the story changes, and it's a slow process to spread that information. So that was 50,000 years ago. But 5,000 years ago, people invented how to write a language on a piece of paper. And that has a disadvantage. If a story is written on paper, the next time that story is read again, that will be the exact same story. The words on paper don't change like they would when somebody was just talking. But so one of the problems was solved. The story doesn't change anymore, but spreading the story was still a slow process, because if we want to spread the story, then this piece of paper could move around. But if we want to speed up that process, somebody had by hand copy that full text, which took a long time, and then we had 2 copies, and then we could make more copies of it. But spreading it still was a slow process because that had to be done by hand. from 50 and 5,000 years ago, we go to 500 years ago. Invention of the book press, where actually the copying of the texts could be done much faster. Yeah, so now the text stays the same, the story stays the same, and we can make copies faster so the information can spread out fast. 500 years ago, book press. Approximately 50 years ago, a new invention of the internet. And then all of the other things became obsolete. People got connected all over the world with others. We could send, for example, emails, and an email that I would send to any part of the world would arrive there in a very short time, and people could read there what I was sending. Contacts, we can make contact with anybody around the world. We can actually have chats of with people anywhere on the world. And if you go to any chat room that is available online these days, you might find there people from all over the world communicating with each other. So that's a great invention. Very rapid spread of information in this new era. Obviously, that's great. I can make contacts to anybody in the world. I can have speak with former colleagues who now live in New Zealand. I might know people in the US. I might know people in Asia, and so I can have contact with them anywhere. And in fact, I can make new contacts with anybody in the world if I would go to a chat room, and I can meet there new people who I've never met before. That's great. But there is a downside to this also, and there's where I want to go and show you this girl. Her name is Amanda Todd. She was a 15-year-old Canadian teenager who was in a couple of years ago also on a chat. She came in contact with a boy from the Netherlands, 18-year-old boy from the Netherlands, and she got talking to him, and actually she made a mistake there. When asked, she showed her breast to this person. That person took a snapshot of that. And then later on, he started extorting her for that. He said, I have this picture where you showed your breast on to me, and now I want you to do more on webcam, and I want you to send me pictures. Otherwise, I will publish this picture. The girl was strong and said, I will not give in to that. But then this guy in the Netherlands, this 18-year-old boy in the Netherlands, he actually published that picture on her Facebook. And so all her friends, all her family, all her schoolmates could see that. And because of that, she got bullied at school. She had to move to a new place, to go to a new school. She moved with her mother. And actually there, the same thing happened. She got desperate, and she actually created a video on YouTube that I urge everybody to go and see. This is a 9-minute video approximately, where Amanda is showing these notes, these notes where she wrote her story. She did not manage to talk during that video. She had to give her message through these notes, and a lot of these notes. And as you can see here, there is a cry for help. I have nobody. I need somebody. Unfortunately, it didn't help. Approximately 2-3 months after she published this video on YouTube, she took her own life at the age of 15. The 18-year-old boy she thought she was chatting to, that appeared to be an adult male, a 35-year-old male living in the Netherlands. This male is this is a picture, a drawing made in the court of law in the Netherlands, where he is actually convicted for similar cases as what he had done to Amanda, and he was convicted to 11 years in jail in the Netherlands. And last December, he was sent to Canada to stand trial also for what happened to Amanda Todd. So here we have a person who changed his identity while on a chat. He was over 30, and he said he was 18. This is from another court case, also in the Netherlands. This is a 41-year-old male who actually was in a chat for children, pretending to be 14. He got in contact with a number of children, and there was a 13-year-old girl who he had a connection with, and they met, and then he took her to a hotel where he kept her for over a week. Without obviously the parents knowing about this. And here he is in court for that. and he told the judge, if I would have said that I was 41 years old, nobody would have talked to me. Then obviously he is in a chat for children. Children want to talk to other children, and at least this 13-year-old girl got tricked by him. This picture you might have seen. This is a picture from Peter Steiner from 1993 already, when there were just like 20 million users on internet. So it was very, very small. And there he already said, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. If you can't see me, if we just sending text messages to each other, I can be anybody. You can't see me, you can't check my identity, and I can just pretend to be anybody, anybody I want. And actually, I will show you in the remaining slides that that is not the case. I will show you that we are able to extract, to detect information from that person, not exactly who it is, but we can extract information about that person. And we can actually also detect these cyber grooming conversations, the one that I showed you in the beginning. So what information do we have? As I said, we have a chat, which is mostly text that we are sending back and forth. And so the only thing that we see in general is the text, the words that somebody is writing. Yeah. In a good case, when implemented by the chat owner, we could maybe have also some information about typing rhythm, but generally speaking, we might not have that. In many chats, you can just send text messages. In some chats, you might be able to send also pictures, and we could also analyze that. But a picture is not safe at all. If I would pretend to be a 12-year-old boy, and the person on the other side asked me to send a picture, I would send, for example, this picture. I would not send a picture of my own, because that would reveal that I am not a 12-year-old boy. Yeah, so the picture, like the words, do not say anything about exactly what a person is. But the pictures can say a lot. And actually, the pictures can say something about the gender of a person. So this is research not by ourselves, but research of what people post on Facebook. And they look at posts of many people, and they look at what are women writing on Facebook and what are men writing on Facebook. What words are used by male and by female Facebook users. And so they found that, English language in this case, they found that female posts use words like shopping and boyfriend and excited and these kinds of words. Male Facebook users, they use different words. Male are more masculine, of course, or they want to be more masculine, and they use, beside a lot of bad words, they use words like Xbox and football and fighting and online playing and these kinds of things. So you see that based on the word usage, we can say something already about the gender of a person. In the same way, we can look at the age of a person based on what he or she is writing. Yeah. So if we look at, for example, the age group 13 to 18, so these are the kids that are still in high school or before that, and they talk about school a lot. They talk about homework and school, and they talk about the courses they have, like English and history, and maybe a bit about best friend and boyfriend and things like that, and a lot of icons and things like that. So that's what, let's say, high school kids are talking about. And then they go over to university, and in principle, it's still a schooling system, except the terminology changes. They're now talking about semesters, and they're talking about the professor, and they're talking about exams and campus and things like that. Maybe they talk about apartment and roommate because they have moved away from their parents. So even though they are in a similar situation, in one way, the word usage has changed. And then after university, they go and build up their life. They get a job, they get married, they buy a house. And so you see that in their word usage again. They say at work, wedding, payday, home, these kinds of things. Yeah. And so they get a job, they have to settle, their life has to take a form. That's what they talk about. And then the last age group is where everything is settled already. You have built your career. You're in a career now. you have your family, your wife and your kids, you have a home where you live and not probably move very often. And so there, often they talk about family, they talk about the daughter and the son and these kinds of things. Or like me, they just post about their cats on Facebook. Yeah, so word usage has changed again. So again, based on my age, I will use different words. I will not talk about homework anymore, for example. And why do we look at these things? Well, there are two reasons we look at those things. One is profiling. We want to say something about age and gender of a person, such that if I think that I'm chatting with somebody who claims to be what will she be, 8-9-year-old girl, that really is a girl of approximately 8 or 9, and that it's not an adult male actually sitting behind that profile. Yeah. So I want to be sure that the person on the other side who claims a particular age, who claims a particular gender, actually fits that profile. So we're working on a project which we called Author Input Behavioral Analysis, IBA, and where the goal is to protect children from online sexual predators. And we can loosely translate that into detecting sexual predatory conversations. So here we have a very schematic way of a chat conversation where there is user input. Yeah, and that user input that can take various forms. So that could be the text for sure that is being sent. Maybe the typing rhythm information could be in there also. And maybe they're sending images, or there is a video, or there is maybe an audio connection. Yeah, so that can also be something like this. The biometric information I can very well use to say something about age and gender based on that. Text information, as I just said, we can also do some age and gender profiling out of that. So this is an analysis box to say something about the age and the gender of the chatter. There is another analysis box where we look at harassment detection, so detecting of the cyber grooming conversation, the conversation that I showed in the beginning. The biometric information, I'm pretty sure that doesn't really help, but we could use the other information, text and media. These two analysis box will look at the user input, which I have from a particular message that is sent. They will analyze that, and the results will be sent to what we call a cyber safety monitor. And the cyber safety monitor is following the full conversations and will now, based on the last message that was used and the analysis of that message, determine if this conversation is still safe to continue. Yeah, we go back and we wait for the next user input, or if somebody should be alerted. Yeah, so what I will do now is actually look at specific text analysis for harassment detection, and then I will say a bit about it. So we had a data set that we used. That was the PAN 2012 competition data set. There were 4 kinds of online chats in there. 2 were, let's say, IT related chats. I have a problem with my computer, or this or that. Yeah, so that's very normal conversations. Then there was perverted justice conversations. Perverted justice is where these are conversations between sexual predators and children. But mind you, the children are not really children. Those are volunteers or policemen pretending to be a child. So the conversation you saw in the beginning, that actually came from perverted justice, but the red person was not really a child of 14 years old. That was a policeman pretending to be a 14-year-old child. And then we have a number of conversations from a website called Omegle. And in that website, users are connected to another random user. So you have one-on-one conversations, and you can just talk to on whatever you want and go to new conversation partners whenever you want. The Omegle conversations can be normal or are normal conversations too, although a large number of them appears to be sexual conversations. So there we have 2 adults. This is just for adults, not for children. 2 adults having a sexual conversation, which is great. That's not the conversations we want to detect, but we want to detect conversations between a child and an adult. The goal of that competition was actually to detect the sexual predators The goal of our research is actually not that. We have done this also, but the goal at this moment is not to detect the sexual predators, but to detect the sexual predatory conversations without pointing at which of the two persons is a sexual predator. A bit about the data. There was a training and a testing data set, huge amount of conversations, but we did some filtering. We know that sexual predators are not chatting in open chat, so they only want to chat in private communication. And so we only looked at two-person conversations. So if there are three or more persons, then we remove that particular chat. Some of the messages, for some reason, were empty. Maybe when images were sent back and forth, that showed up as an empty message. So we removed that. We didn't have that. We only have text. And we wanted at least 6 messages in the conversation. It could be 5 from one person and 1 from the other, or 3 and 3, and that didn't matter. Yeah. So, but in total, at least 6 messages in the conversation. And when we looked at those conversations, then this is what was left. And for example, for the training, we had well over 20,000 conversations left, with over 830,000 different messages in these conversations. So approximately 40 messages per conversation. Still many users, over 35,000, of which 228 were marked as sexual predators. So those, the conversation that these people were in, those were the ones that we tried to detect. We used natural language processing because that's what we have. We have text available. We did some pre-processing, like we removed all the capitals. We converted that to lowercase letters. We removed all the commas and the periods and all the special characters. And so we were left only with words. Then we removed stop words. Stop words are words like of and the and to and these kinds of words that make it easy for us to read a sentence but don't really contribute to the content of the message. So we remove those, and then we extracted features in 2 different ways. One is called bag of words, which actually considers a sentence or a message as a set of words in that message without looking at the order of the words. Term frequency, inverse document frequency is a slight variation of it, and I will not go into the details for reason of time. We did the analysis as was requested by the competition, the PAN 2012 competition, but for now I want to only focus on this conversation-based detection of the sexual predators in a 2-stage process, where we first look at a conversation and say this is a normal conversation, or this is a suspicious conversation. The suspicious conversation, that's the one that we, in the 2nd stage, would look at which of the 2 would be the predator. Yeah, but as I'm now talking only on detecting the cyber grooming conversation and not the cyber grooming groomer, him or herself, we will only look at this particular step. I guess you might have heard about these. We measure true and false positive, true and false negative. So meaning that we measure where we classify a conversation correctly and where we misclassify a conversation. And we calculate normal statistical measurements out of that, precision and recall. And then we'll look mostly at the F1 score, which is a combination of precision and recall, such that both measurements are taken into account. As said, we had over 20,000 conversations. We had 228 sexual predators and a lot of non-predators, luckily. And of the 20,000 conversations, there were approximately 1,600 that were marked as predatory conversation. We actually used 5 different classifiers in our research. Logistic, regression, rich, naive Bayes, support vector machine, and neural networks. And then, as I mentioned before, we use these 2 different related but 2 different feature set, bag of words, and term frequency, inverse document frequency. And then the results, these are the results. This one is the results of the 5 classifiers for bag of words, and this is the results of the 5 classifiers for term frequency, inverse document frequency features. And you don't have to read over all of these results, but the best results was actually with these TF-IDF features and using support vector machine as our classification algorithm. And we got a precision of almost 1, so very, very good. Very few false positives. A recall which is slightly lower, but then the combination of the two in the F1 score was 0.94, which was, compared to the results that were in the PAN 2012 competition, a very high score. We ranked among the top 3 there. So that was very interesting, but that was not the end of our research. Obviously, it is important that we detect cyber grooming conversations going on. But there is a more important issue than, yes, we have detected it. That more important issue is we have detected it early. Yeah, so if I have a system that would have the same results as I have here for SVM, then you could say both of them perform equally. Yeah, but maybe the first system detects a cyber grooming conversation already after 20 messages and the other after 200 messages. Then we can clearly say the first system performs better because not a lot could have gone wrong in these 20 messages. The longer I wait, the more bad things can happen. And so we want to detect grooming conversation as early as possible. And so what we did is we looked at a number of full converted justice conversations, and then we analyzed the first message in that conversation only and said, do we now think that that is a suspicious conversation? No? Then what if we look at the first 2 messages, the first 3 messages, 4 messages? And so we kept it growing until our analysis said, hey, this is a suspicious conversation. And you see the results here. We have to look at these 2 columns. This one is the actual length of the whole conversation. Yeah, so on average, if you take the average, that's over 3,000 messages on average. This is when our system said, hey, this is a suspicious conversation. That was on average 40 messages. Yeah, so on average, after 40 messages, we can already detect that this is a cyber grooming conversation, and we can forget about the other 2,000, almost 3,000 messages, and protect the child right there and then already. For example, the conversation I showed in the beginning, that was this particular conversation, and that system is already detects after 49 messages out of over 2,500 messages that, hey, there is something strange going on here, and we have to take action. The way we do that is by using something that we call risk analysis. I will step a bit through it. So here you see the messages of a conversation, and then we analyze the yellow messages and the green messages. And here we see, based on the full conversation so far, what the risk of this conversation is. And the risk is still very low here, and we'll go a bit further on. You see here that there have been some messages which increase the risk of the conversation. And that could be a message. I'm not sure which one of these messages are. I think it's this one. Yeah. A word like bored is something that we see a lot in sexual predatory conversations. Yeah. If a child is bored, that is something that the sexual predator actually acts upon. And we see that based on that word, or amongst other that word, the risk of that conversation is going up. But then there is a number of very innocent messages, and the risk is going down again. Yeah, and if you see now in a conversation, the risk is going up and down all the time. And then if we go a bit further into this conversation, then all of a sudden we see that the risk is rising above a particular threshold. Yeah, and you see that this is around this time that I also in the beginning, when I was talking about this conversation, yeah, here this is something where we immediately saw, hey, something is wrong here. And at that point in time, or around that point in time, the risk of this conversation is going way up over a threshold. And at that point, we could warn a human moderator for this chat and say, hey, have a look at this conversation. And then that person should have should read the conversation and take action. You see here that it even even goes higher. Loss is going a bit down. Yeah, so this is how we analyze our conversations. We analyze the conversation so far. We translate that into a risk value. Then there is a next message coming that we analyze, and based on the old risk level and the analysis of the new message, we update the risk for that conversation. So as a conclusion, I'm not sure, I think I went a bit over time, apologies for that. As a conclusion, I have shown you that behavioral biometrics, maybe not the biometrics you thought about in the beginning, but the biometrics anyway, we can use that to help us detect sexual predators in online conversation. And we used, as said, keystroke dynamics, so the typing rhythm, and stylometry, what the person is writing. As said, it's important to detect as soon as possible, yeah, before any harm can be done to a child. We want to detect that that something is wrong, and so our method already detected after 40 messages, while the full conversation was much longer. And what we do is, this is a machine that is doing the analysis, and a machine should never point at a person and say you are a sexual predator. So that's why we calculate the risk level, and we send that back to the chat provider, and there a human moderator should read through that conversation and determine if it's really sexual predator. And because we did not say that either, we should say which of these two persons that are chatting is actually the sexual predator. So that was all that I had to say. I'm not sure if there is any question or if there's time for questions. I must admit, I'm not entirely sure how the system works. So I'm not sure if questions are placed somewhere.
Yeah, Professor, thank you. Thank you for insights about the biometrics. And one question we have here, so how consistent are the world cloud statistics over geographical or cultural backgrounds of the users?
I must admit that this research is based on publicly available data, and the perverted justice conversations, those are the sexual predatory conversations in there. One of the downsides of that is that the children in these cyber grooming conversations were not children, as I just said. So one of the things that we need to do is we have to, for a potential customer, a potential chat provider that wants to use this system, we have to get from that chat provider data of normal conversations, data of sexual predatory conversations that they detected manually in the past, and then we have to retrain this system, and that will be a system specifically for that particular chat provider. A different chat provider would have to be trained from scratch again. But the idea stays the same. We can detect the conversations relatively fast. You saw that there was some variation in how long it took to detect that conversation. You see some of these have need a bit more time. Some of them are very fast. Sexual predators also have different approaches. Some sexual predators go into a chat, and within a few messages they say, okay, what are you wearing? Are you alone? These kinds of things. Some of them will take very long time. They will just chat, have a lot of chit chat in the beginning, and before they really are going towards their goal of grooming the child.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I request audience, if anybody having doubts, please raise your hands, and please unmute yourself and speak. Please unmute yourself and speak. Otherwise, type the questions in the chat window.
I think I will stop the.
Yeah, please, Professor. You can stop the presentation.
I think there is something in the chat that I can. There is a lot of questions in the chat.
Okay. Any questions, you please type it in the chat window.
Kindly share the PPT. I'm happy to share my PowerPoint.
Yeah, you please share to me, sir. Dr. Amber?
Yeah, I see the question. So we actually have done different analysis. So now I was talking about one specific research that we have done where we did remove the stop words and removed also the special characters. In other research, we have done easier pre-processing where we just kept a number of special characters, where we did not remove any stop words, and where we actually looked at a combination of machine learning algorithms to get a slightly higher performance than the one that I showed. So yes, it is done a lot, stop word removal, but not everywhere. The problem, actually, even a bigger problem with the chat data, is that the chat data is not in English. And all the chat that you saw was written in English, but remember that in the beginning it said, this is Chris from Meet Me, right? And they wrote it R-I-T-E. So there is a lot of English looking, but not actually English dictionary words in there. And so that's a bigger problem, because words can be written in many different ways while they actually mean the same. RU can be either R-A-R-E space Y-O-U, or it can be R-U, so two letters, or there can be a space in between it even. And so that makes it very difficult, this particular way of typing. Surely age groups have a different style of typing. We did not actually run the analysis of age on the given data set for two reasons. First of all, we did not have the exact information, except for in the perverted justice data. We know that the cyber groomer was an adult, but the other one was an adult pretending to be a child. So, but we have other data collected in a controlled environment here in Norway, that we can use to build a profile about both gender recognition between adults, gender recognition between children, and age recognition between children and adults. When I say age recognition, I just mean age group. So either child, let's say below 16, or adult above 18. The data set that I discussed, the PAN data set, that's publicly available. So just Google for PAN 2012, and then you'll find links to that. The data that we are collecting at the moment ourselves, or that we have collected, I should say, those are not publicly available. We have a number of pilot customers for the project. Obviously, we cannot share that data either from them. Okay. Not sure if those were all the questions. One thing that I can say also related to this particular question about the stop word removal is also language. I mentioned that chat language is different from English language, but also if we train this system for a Norwegian system based on Norwegian language, then it will not work at all at, let's say, French or German. We have to train it for each language separately. I'm not sure if there's more questions.
Any device specific? Hello.
Sorry?
Yeah, one more question is here. So whether it is any device specific very, since it's communication message, I think it is not clear. The question is not clear per se. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, sir. It was a wonderful session.
Thank you for having me. I will share the presentation with you so you can share them further.
Yeah, sure, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
It is,
Thank you very much.
yeah, it's my thank you. It's all participants benefited by your wonderful session. Thank you for having with us in spite of your busy schedule. I take this opportunity to thank you for giving an full speech on protection of cyber grooming through the use of behavioral biometrics. Thank you, sir. And also,
thank you, Dr. Patrick.
And also, I take this opportunity to thank all the participants for patience listening. And I thank all the organizing committee members and all the executive members of IEEE Information Security Society Bangalore chapter. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Goodbye. Have a great evening.
So.
என் அப்பாவை பத்தி எனக்கு தெரியுமா இல்ல உனக்கு தெரியுமா? அவர் இருக்கிற இடத்துல என்ன ஒரு நாள் அவர்